I'd like to come back to the early years with Magnum, and very briefly, because I mean, people have heard about the Magnum stories, etc., etc. But my question would be: do you feel like in joining Magnum at some point, sort of again had an impact on your work, or did you stay focused in what you wanted to achieve? Well, even this morning, briefly, you were mentioning also the story with Martin when you started with Magnum, and to say, oh yeah, from now on you have to do such and things, and you say to me, well, I felt like I should do it, but then I felt like also I want to carry on doing the way I work as well.
Well, I was 43 when I applied to Magnum. So I think I was fairly set in my ways by then, you know. So I never tried to second guess what the membership wanted in order to get through the various hoops. I was always quite confident that I knew what I was doing, although I very nearly did get asked to leave after the first 2 years because I was doing this work called 26 Different Endings, about the edge of the A to Z. And that was a little bit too subtle for some, I think. But I managed to scrape through in the end and became a member after 5 years. But it's a long process, you get voted on all the time. And
of course.
So no, I don't think my work has changed. I would say that I think it's got better because it's kind of inevitable, I think, that, you know, my close friends in Magnum are people I really respect and admire, people like Alex Soth, Jim Goldberg, Alessandra Sanguinetti, Trent Park. These are, you know, close friends of mine. And
so you share a lot between you
we
when
do.
you produce something,
we send each other artwork.
Pictures and artwork.
Yeah, and I think it's really, you know, it puts a lot of pressure on you to sort of make the best work you can. But it's also, there's something about not wanting to let your colleagues down in a way, especially, you know, when we work together on group projects. I've tried now to instigate within the group project system in Magnum, when there's several photographers working on something together, I'm trying to get the staff to make sure that they share the work of each photographer with or the other photographer, so we all know what everyone else is doing. Not so much so we don't tread on anyone's toes and do the same kind of work, because I don't think we do, but more importantly, if you see someone doing some really exceptional work, it's going to raise your own game. It's a kind of healthy competitiveness, I suppose, in the best possible way. And so I think my own bar has raised somewhat.
I think at that stage we should introduce Kodak for the interview, because the poor dog has been sort of sitting there very gently.
Come here.
Oh, look at you! Come on.
Yes, I know. And no one's taken any notice of you. I know.
Oh, come on, Kodak.
Come on.
You've been doing very well.
You have. But you have to go back to your basket. You know, I think it might surprise people to know that, you know, Magnum membership is, for me anyway, is not, and I think I could probably safely say this for every member, it's not about the fame or I mean, or the money one might earn or not earn. It's much more about the comradeship and the fact that, for me, it's really important that I feel like it's really pushed my work forward. You can't sit on your laurels. I mean, people are always asking what you're up to. We have these we have the meeting once a year where we discuss finances, but then we have a second meeting, after 6 months in between the two other ones, which is all about the work that we're doing. We do presentations to each other. And it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't afraid to say what they think.
Yeah, it's about pushing yourself in some way in every single corner. Yeah,
indeed.
Okay. Now I'd like to talk about the sound of two songs, because, and for me, I feel like that body of work is a very important one in your career. I feel like it's almost like, shall I say that, to reach a certain level of maturity in your work. And I'm not saying that you were immature before, but I'm just saying that it's something which is really like extremely important emotionally speaking. but also in terms of execution as well. There's something really, really deep in that work, because you're using quite a lot of metaphor. It's about embracing an entire country, your own way, etc., etc. So do you want to talk a little bit about how the project started and then how you approached the project?
Yeah. Well, I talked earlier about Magnum group projects. I think one of the strengths of the agency is the fact that we're all different. So, and this was quite a typical kind of project. It was 10 photographers. There were 10 countries joining the Kodak. Please be quiet. Quiet. Shh. 10 countries joined the European Union in 2004. So one photographer went to each of those countries for a month. And then there was a show at the Pompidou Centre at the end, which is, I'd only just joined Magnum a year before, so this was a big thing for me. And I was given Poland, which was the biggest country by far to join in 2004. If you added up the populations and the physical size of all the other 9 countries, you get a country the size of Poland. So it was the big one. I suppose it's made me think more internationally. So I was really reticent to make a project about somewhere else that I didn't really understand. I never believed in this idea of spending enough time in a place you get under the skin of a place. You might learn a language and then you understand the place. I don't go for that at all. I always feel like I'm from somewhere else, and that's how I approached Poland. And I think it partially explains why I use large format cameras, which are highly detailed, because it allows me. David Chandler coined this phrase for what I do as a kind of intimate distance, so that I'm at a sort of discrete distance from the landscape and from the people, and yet the clarity of the cameras that I'm using means that when you see the pictures, you really feel a connection with it. So although it may feel like the pictures are quite detached, they're actually, I'm not detached really at all. I'm actually very 100% engaged in the thing. It's just that I make these pictures from a distance, and I make pictures which are completely sharp all the way through the picture plane, unless I'm making portraits, but that's rare. So it's very important to me to have sharpness front to back, so that it engages with the viewer's interests, prejudices, perhaps, to be able to look at the things in the picture that the viewer is interested in looking at. If I put something in shallow focus, I'm telling the viewer to look at that thing. But if everything's in focus and and you're standing back and there's lots of things in there, because I make quite complex pictures, if there's lots of things going on, then I'm not really telling anybody what to look at. They're quite objective, if I dare use that word, as far as photographs are concerned. But of course they're subjective from the point of view of I'm dictating the edge of the frame and I'm choosing to show you that picture rather than this one. But aside from that, I'm really interested in cameras and lenses that show the world as they look, which is another reason why I use cameras with movements, which means that you can alter the difference between the front and the back, the lens and the film plane to make buildings straight. Because the world is like that. Our brains sort that out. Unless you're standing under the Empire State Building, you get these converging verticals. Of course you do, because your brain can't work that out. But normally speaking, you're walking around a city, everything looks very straight. Yeah. If you walk around the city with a handheld camera without movements, and as soon as you tip it upright, away from the sort of the absolute completely horizontal, you start to get converging verticals. And we don't see the world like that. So I'm trying to make pictures as I see. And it's often not noticed by people because the pictures can look very boring because they look like they don't look very new to us. They don't, but you don't, I think sometimes viewers don't understand the kind of equipment, the effort that's gone into making something look so ordinary.
Absolutely.
If you like.
But you also use, I wanted to ask you, what did the very first time that you use so much metaphor in your work as well? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, the photos of the forest with next to it the children. I'm thinking about the Dunkst bunker.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the greenhouse, which is obviously relevant to the extermination of the Jews, etc., etc. So, I mean, and I've seen that this body of work is full of references and full of metaphor that is probably not as present in the previous work, because if I mean, maybe I'm wrong again, but I was thinking about the 26 and
different endings.
Different endings. There's a similar approach, but you don't have the sort of metaphorical, or have you?
No, you don't, because that works very much as about a sense of place, and it's very sort of matter of fact. There is metaphor in my previous work, but sometimes I didn't really realise it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very open about the fact that, you know, I've learnt a lot about my work through other people telling me what I'm doing.
Yeah, but that's good. I think it's, you're not necessarily always conscious about or conscious about
and
I
learned
what you're doing.
I learned about the power of the metaphor when people who were looking at the shipping forecast were sort of seeing things in the images that I hadn't even began to think about. And then, it's really hard not to adopt those ideas as your own, but the shipping forecast for me was already complicated enough. In Poland, if we take the Holocaust, for instance, I'm interested in history. Poland is a place that is stuck between Germany and the Soviet Union, or Russia, and it wasn't the best place to be in the 20th century. So their history, not just in the 20th century, but all the way back, it disappeared off the map altogether for 200 years. So as a country, it's had a very checkered and interesting past, and often very tragic past. And I felt like if I'm going to do a 5-year project, because I started with a 1-month project, by the way, which was commissioned, and then I decided I quite liked what I was doing, despite everything, and I was interested in the country, and I was interested in trying to make more work there. So this continued for 5 years. I realised I had to make some kind of reference to the Holocaust, because I can't ignore it, because most of it happened there. So the death camps were. The Nazi death camps were in Poland. I visited every single one of them. I took very, very few pictures. And the picture I do use is of some abandoned industrial ducting in a pile in an abandoned factory in Gdansk, which is because it refers to photographs that we've seen from Auschwitz, for instance, of piles of clothes or glasses or whatever. And there are these moments throughout Korea. Let's go back to the shipping forecast again, actually. A picture that's not in the book, but very, very early on, I thought I had to have the sea in every single picture, And then I took a picture almost by accident of a dog wearing a life jacket on the beach, and I was looking up the beach because I was the wrong side of the dog. And the sea isn't in the picture, but the life jacket, the pebbles on the beach, we know we're in the vicinity of the beach. So those kind of moments that suddenly open up all these possibilities. Yeah. And I think the whole idea of the metaphor, that Gdansk picture was it's an early picture for me. I did it during that first month. And it opened up all these other ideas for me of the way that I could start talking about a country as I view it as an outsider. That's the important thing. So... And I think that it's a reaction to that 3 years of working between 89 and 92 for the media, where so much of what I had to produce then had to be easily consumable, easily understandable. They were pictures to look at while you were reading, having your breakfast on a Sunday morning, that kind of thing. Nobody wanted to be, we weren't allowed to challenge the viewer. Yeah. And as soon as you start making work for yourself, then it opens up all these other possibilities of, withholding information. So I'm very much of the belief that you should make the viewer work a little bit. On a level, the pictures are fine, and they're sort of, I hope they're interesting and they're in focus and everything, and they're nicely composed, blah blah blah. But there is something else there as well, because I like books. And I like to make books that I think you can look at more than once. I think that the more you look at it, the more there is to discover in them, and that's where I get my kicks when I look at my favourite photo books, and I try to do that with my own.
But I think the key also, for your work is is maybe because you put so much of yourself into your photos as well. I mean, even in The Sound of Two Songs, I remember the portrait. I mean, you decided to take a portrait of your assistant, if I remember well, in one of the photos. So we're not talking about the country, but we're more talking about the personal relationship between you and him. And you wanted that picture to be part of the exhibition. I remember that clearly. So there's something which is fundamentally, it's not only about you analysing a country, but it's you being part of this country as well.
Inevitably, and I think it gave me. The more I went on with that project, the more I got the confidence to think that actually I could do something and was of value to Polish people. You know, I don't mean everybody, but you know, my first reaction was, of course, what have I got to say about somewhere else that I don't understand? What is that, you know? And it wasn't until Conrad showed me the state of Polish photography as it was in 2004, 2005. It was very stuck in the past. Not now. Now with the internet, you know, photographers all over the world have learned how to be, you know, more challenging photographers. Now Polish photography is at the cutting edge. But back then it was very old-fashioned. And the photo books that you could buy were about the Holocaust, or they were about pretty castles and lakes and mountains that, as a tourist, you were supposed to go and visit, and everything was in glorious sunshine. And while I'm driving around in the passenger seat of Conrad's Subaru, I'm looking out of the window and everything's grey and flat, and there's just, you know, it's grim. And I thought, well, that's not the Poland I recognise. So I thought, well, maybe there's something to be said about that. And the other thing I learned quite quickly was that when you understand a place, you tend to get very bogged down in details. And it's a good thing. You know, I use the metaphor of, say, you see a rubbish on the street in Britain, and you know why there's rubbish on the street, because you know la-di-da's and, you know, whatever's on strike, or, you know, whatever. And but if you see rubbish on the street in Poland, you don't know why it's there. It becomes something, you know, quite different. You're looking at it from a different perspective. So you tend to work on, if you understand the country where you're working, if you're from there, your subjects become more and more macro, if you like. They become about one idea. And I thought, as someone from the outside, I had the potential to be able to look at the country from afar, to do a kind of survey, if you like. I'm not likening myself to 19th century American photographers going out into the West and discovering things, or Fox Talbot, whoever it was, going to Egypt. I mean, it's not quite like that. But on the other hand, I am still exploring a place I don't know, and it's exciting.